Okay, the first thing I want to point out is I'm going to close this. Is that SawStudio and Midi WorkStation are two different programs. It's important to understand this because they both have option MIDI device setup. Right here, option MIDI device setup. And seeing that I have a Axiom Pro MIDI controller, I only have one. I can only have it as a MIDI device in MIDI device setup in either SawStudio or Midi WorkStation. You can't have them assigned in both. And if you have Midi WorkStation, you just have it assigned in that. It should work, do everything you need it to do. If you do not have Midi WorkStation, then you would assign it here so that you could play your VST instruments and then record the audio right here in the multitrack. It's pretty simple. Okay. So, I want to set up my MIDI device, which is a MIDI keyboard controller. It is not a synthesizer. It has no sounds in it. And just for your information, you do not have to set up the INI files for a MIDI controller. You only do that for physical sound modules like a Yamaha S80 or S90 or your Motif or other keyboards that you want to use. But I'm just using a MIDI controller that has no sounds in it. So I want to set that up so I can record the data that it puts out into Midi WorkStation. It will record what note I hit, how long I hold it, whether I use a sustain pedal, and so on. That's all Midi WorkStation does. It records your input. It doesn't record any sound. People need to understand that. They get confused. MIDI is so simple. Once you understand that all MIDI is recording how hard you hit a key, what key you hit, whether it's an A, a B, a C minor, whatever, whether you hit how hard you hit it, how long you hold it, a sustain pedal, and so on. That's all it is. And once you record it, you can easily edit your performance. And then what happens when you press play here, all Midi WorkStation is doing is playing the instrument, playing the VST for you. You play it outside in the real world on your MIDI controller. It records it here, you edit it here, and then it plays it for you, the corrected performance. That's all MIDI is. And it's so easy to edit it. That's what makes MIDI so great. There's a lot of other things, but in short, that's all it does. So let's get started here. I'm going to set up my Axiom Pro MIDI controller. And the same thing, you would do the same thing whether you have a real keyboard, a Motif, or a Yamaha S90 or whatever. So I'm going to go to Options, MIDI Device, and this dialog box opens up and you have your outputs. You click this button, it just toggles between the both. It's not out here and in here. It's just anywhere on it. Toggles between the both. So the output is anything that you want Midi WorkStation, when you record data in here and you press play, what do you want Midi WorkStation to play? Do you want Midi WorkStation to play a VST instrument you have? Or do you want Midi WorkStation to play like my Alesis DM10 drum module? That has sounds in it, so Midi WorkStation can play it. Or a synthesizer out in the outside world, like a Motif. So you go to the drop-down menu here, and the only thing I have that it can play in the outside world would be the DM10 drum module, or it could go out to my ProFire 2626 MIDI, excuse me, and then anything I hook up to it, it will be automatically patched in. So I'm gonna say out 1 is that, and out 2 is going to be my DM10. That's the only thing I have out there. It shows all kinds of other things, but I don't have anything hooked up to them. But now I'm going to assign a VST MIDI Workstation virtual port. And this is how MIDI Workstation links to your VSTs. So I'm gonna put up 2 of them. I'll probably only ever use 1 at a time, but I'll have 2 just for the heck of it. Now I'm gonna click here. I'm gonna put ProFire. I'm gonna put out, just so I see out. It makes it easier to reference for me. DM10 out. VST1 out. Oop. This is the way I configure it, because it makes it easier for me this way. You can name it anything you want. Out. Okay, so I have that set up. Those are my outputs. Now my inputs. Inputs. Now, this is, the input is what device are you using to input the data into MIDI Workstation that it's going to record. And I only have 2 things. I have my Axiom Pro, and I can choose MIDI in, MIDI A, MIDI B, and I'll choose MIDI A in, and I can record from my Alesis DM10 drum module. So when I play my, my electric drum set, I can record it in here. I can edit anything I want, and then it plays it back, and then I can play it back into SawStudio if I please. Okay, so here I'm going to put Axiom in, and then I'm going to put DM10 in. So now I have everything set up. It's that simple. I press OK. I go to File, Preferences File, and Save as Default. Got to do that.